What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Open Championship Week. Do I feel pressure here? Maybe a little bit. Morikawa outright 2 years ago, got the outright with Cam Smith last year, looking to make it 3 in a row in this historic event. How are you, Justin? How excited are you to try and get another outright?
This is my favorite week of the year, generally speaking. It's a little bit down this year because of course conditions, but yeah, I think there is some super value out there because players are being priced like it's the British Open, and you're going to find some unique situations where it plays more like American golf and not so much British Open. So I think the value's there this year. I think there's going to be some interesting plays in the way that it all comes about. But yeah, it's always a fun week, and there's nothing better than waking up with a cup of coffee and watching the British Open.
Yeah, it's a viewing experience unlike any other. And it's especially funny because I think we're going to get this massive contrast to what was maybe the worst viewing experience of the year last week at the Scottish. Speaking of, we often start these shows with a recap of the previous week. We will talk plenty about the Scottish, about Rory, but we're going to do it within the context of certain players' course fit. So let's jump right into this really important course fit discussion for Royal Liverpool. Where do you want to start?
I think that the biggest place to start right here is the course fit stuff is so different than your generic British Open because of how soft it is and how the players are talking about the scores being lower, but also, you know, the small greens and the runoffs on all the sides and how big of a deal shaping the ball correctly into slopes and, you know, your iron shots really, really are going to show who the best iron players in the world are.
Yeah, completely agree there. Let's go take a look at what the course fit model is telling us for all Open championships, by the way. So looking at the course fit model, we can see throughout Open championships, there has been little to no predictive value whatsoever for either aspect of driving. One of the bigger surprises, especially coming off of a year at St. Andrews last year where driving distance was clearly incredibly predictive of success. You know, Bryson had no form whatsoever, bombed the ball, and because of the way that course is set up, was had himself a really strong week. So despite that, we still have little to no predictive value whatsoever for either aspect off the tee. All of it concentrated in approach play around the green and then some putting signal as well. Do you think that this added emphasis on iron play and around the green play will carry over here at Royal Liverpool?
I think that driving distance this year will matter way more than it has in previous years because of the softer conditions. So I think that the interesting thing about these bunkers is the penalty is so high if you hit it in one, especially off the tee where you're chipping out sideways, that a lot of the longer players were hitting 4 irons to the same place that another player might hit 3 wood and another player might hit driver. So this year you're going to have a little bit different because the ball's not going to be rolling out as much. So people are going to be able to hit more club and you're going to see distance matter more, in my opinion. I had this discussion this morning with a friend of mine, same idea. What are you looking for this week? Well, I'm looking for winnability. What generally goes with winnability? The best drivers of the golf ball. Yeah. And so therefore this week I think is different than, and I think that's probably why I like the British Open, generally speaking, is I hit it so short. I like it when distance doesn't matter. And it becomes really fun when a guy that flies at 280 can win compared to the guys that are flying at 300. That being said, there's still a lot of challenges at this place that can be overlooked. I mean, I'm hearing all these, it's going to be 15 to 20 under to win. I think that that's probably accurate from what I've seen, but I think you're going to see a huge disparity. So I think you're going to see 5 to 10 guys, 15 to 20 under, and then a huge gap back to, you know, say 15th at like 8 under.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can definitely see that. Most of the time when we're breaking down a course, I like to think about it from the tee to the green. And I think this week is definitely one to think about it from the green and then working backwards. And that's something that Brooks Koepka has talked about in all major championships. Like one of the reasons he thinks he does a really good job in majors is because he comes up with a game plan working his way backwards from the green to the tee box. And I think we talked a little bit beforehand, before we went live here, about how difficult these green complexes are. And so the main shape of these green complexes is basically like an upside down bowl where everything around the outside of the green just funnels away from the green, down into deep bunkers, down into swales, down into fescue rough, whatever the case is. And it makes for greens that are a lot smaller effectively than what their actual like square footage is. So there's that aspect of it. And then because virtually every single ball around the greens is ending up in a difficult spot, short games are going to be tested. And so I definitely think that the short game signal in other Open championships will translate to this one. Then we work back even further, back to iron play, and we see, hey, if around the green is so difficult, and if these greens have so many different tiers to them, as I saw on the overlay, or just subtle breaks in areas where you have to be super precise with both distance control and then also accuracy, I think we're going to see, as you said, like this course is going to reward really, really strong iron play, not just in the sense that you have to be really precise to give yourself birdie opportunities and keep the ball from bouncing away from the green, but also since that when you miss, you're missing in places where you have a decent chance to get up and down from, and not places where you're just kind of screwed.
Yeah. So the other thing is, I'll be interested to see, the first thing that comes to mind is where Cam Smith putted from last year on 18, right up and around the bunker. Mm-hmm. And I'd like to see if that's a viable option this year, with it being wet and slower, and it's going to be a little bit harder to putt from those places. So, do you need to start looking more at the guys that are really good at tight lie chipping, because they're going to mow everything down tight. It's going to be difficult. Is it still viable to putt from those places with it being so much greener and so much slower? Or are we going to have somebody that's really, really good around the greens that chips it really well? And once again, to me, all signals point to Cam Smith.
And Cam Smith is definitely somebody who pops if you take the approach that driving won't matter off the tee. And, he's absolutely world-class, maybe the best player in the world once you get off the tee. Like if you put everybody in the fairway at the same spot and just started to hold that way, or just played par threes, there's a decent chance he's already the best in the world. Where the real best in the world, Rory, Scotty, separate from him is purely off the tee. So if you do trust this course fit model, then you're pointing even more to Cam Smith, which I think is a good segue to talk about why, even with the length, we still might see the signal for driving be a little bit less than usual this week. You mentioned how because it's longer, or because it's playing longer, both in the added distance and also in the course conditions, that we're going to see more drivers from people. But we even still heard Rory say this week that this course is all about strategy and game planning and figuring out what he wants to hit off of each tee. So he certainly might hit many more drivers this time around than the last time, but it's still a decision to be made. And I think the main decision is, what do you do when you're presented with all of these devastating bunkers off the tee boxes, where I think like one of the key points is there are going to be guys who miss their line by 5 yards off the tee and they're pitching out from a bunker. It's like literally a full stroke penalty. And then there are going to be guys who hit a terrible drive 15, 25 yards offline, and they're just in a harmless lie in the rough. And so I do think there's a little bit of added variance off the tee here, where it's a little bit less like a normal week, in the sense that small misses might get penalized more than big misses. And then you also might just get a little bit of randomness, where like a guy thinks he just hit a perfect drive and it ends up in a bunker. Another guy thinks he hit it right into the bunker and somehow it skirts by and he's in perfect shape. So that's one way, just added variance off the tee, that we could see that signal decrease this week.
And I agree. And that's where the British Open, I think, generally is so fun, is because there are so many shots. I think that just bound into bunkers and stuff, from what I've seen with the softer conditions, I feel like if you have the right game plan and hit the correct shot, you're not going to get the variance of bounces that you do in a common British Open. So, like, if you have your game plan correct and you know you can't hit it to a certain bunker and you hit a good shot, you're not going to get one that hits on the downside of a mound that rolls out 50 yards instead of 20 and goes into some, really bad bunker. So I think that's the part of the British Open we might miss. But, I think from what I've seen, there, no precipitation till Saturday. So they're going to try to get it as firm as possible. I mean, you're not going to get it to typical British Open, but, maybe you can get it a little bit firm by Friday afternoon. But if it rains all day Saturday, we're right back where we start. And it doesn't look like much carnage. So we're not going to see like a Sunday like we did last week, I don't think.
Yeah, it's worth noting that regardless of what we say here on the show, like everything could change in an instant if the forecast changes. So we're not going to spend too much time talking about, hey, what do we expect from the weather? Does it look like there's going to be an edge to the late early wave or the early late wave? Because forecasts change over in that part of the world so quickly and so severely from one day to the next that the only weather note we have is get yourself in the Discord chat Wednesday night and let's talk it through then. Yeah. Until then, there's one other aspect that I really want to talk about when it comes to this golf course and particularly the way it sets up off the tee, and that is these crazy internal out of bounds. So for those who haven't seen, sharing my screen now, this is a picture of the 18th fairway. It's a par 5, and you can see this burn over here on the right. It's just barely off the fairway, and everything right of this. So this entire area over here is an internal out of bounds. If you hit it in there, you are re-teeing with your third shot. I think that what I've heard around the industry, a lot of the discussion when it comes to these internal out of bounds is that it's going to be extremely frustrating when your guy ends up hitting it out of bounds. My takeaway is a little bit different, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts. So let me start with this question to you. Justin, if you're playing this hole, par 5, this is what it looks like. Where is your target off of this tee? Where are you trying to hit this ball?
Well, I just think everybody's probably hitting it short of the bunkers, there on the left, right? That's probably so. And this is the other side of this is why I dislike it so much. Is that everybody's going to hit it to the same spot, and then somebody like you might be able to hit it on the green from there, whereas I'm laying it up to the 100-yard marker again, right? So I'm hitting 2 layup shots, whereas some of the longer guys are going to hit it short of that bunker and then have the ability to hit it on the green from there. I don't know that to be truth. I have no idea how far it is from those bunkers to the hole, but just generally speaking, most guys in this field that hit it far could probably hit 3-wood 4-iron on the green, but I'm going to guess they're going to hit 4-iron 3-wood.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what the distances are here. I know the hole itself is over 600 yards, so I'm kind of thinking that this is going to play more like a 3-shot hole for everybody in the field. But regardless, your point is really well taken that everyone's going to end up in pretty much the same spot off the tee. And that's my main point here. And so imagine for a second that this was just fescue over here, penalizing fescue, but to the point where if you hit it in there, you're just laying up. It's a forced layup. Instead, then what we're going to see is a lot of guys take on these bunkers. Maybe they're aiming away from these bunkers, which again, most likely you're just pitching out and you're hitting your third from over 200 yards. So they're trying to take this on. They're trying to put their drive somewhere up into this area where now it's a clear green light to go for the green in 2. Instead, everybody's going to say, this is a big no-no. I could play this golf course 50 times and I wouldn't want to hit it in there a single time. If I even flirt with it, it was a mistake. And that's because they're going to be aiming way over here. In fact, I think a lot of guys will even take the approach where their target is going to be all the way on the left edge of this fairway. They're going to take a club that doesn't even reach these bunkers, so those aren't in play. This is their target. If they're in this left fescue, so be it. They're laying up anyway. If they're in the fairway, great. They're laying up anyway. In other words, the ability to create any separation over the field off the tee basically doesn't exist on this hole. I think this is the most extreme example on the golf course, but I do think there are other examples where this type of pattern does show up. And it's another reason why, even though it's going to play a little bit softer, and it's certainly going to play longer than in years past. I still think that what we see in other Open Championships, this lack of driving signal, will translate into this event as well. And that puts me in a rare spot because 99% of the time in PGA, DFS, and betting, I am more on the side of driving is the only thing that matters than almost anybody else. And now this week, everyone else is talking about, hey, I think driving might be really important this week. And I'm actually going the other way. So a bit of an odd situation for me, but I feel pretty strongly about it. I think it gives us a pretty big edge.
Well, and so my thing, I think that you're right, and I think you have a lot to go by there. I think that all that being said, I will have one lineup that is strictly built on driving distance, so that if that becomes the main factor, at least I know I'm covered in one lineup of like, hey, I'm just going to worry about. I mean, you've talked about this a lot. The narrative, building on a narrative. And I think that if you wanted to build build one complete lineup on the driving distance or total driving narrative, if that does show up, then at least you know that you have one lineup built around that.
100%. And I will be doing the same, by the way. I will have a skill set stack or two where I do go all in on driving. If there is a path to driving mattering a ton, I think it's not on this hole specifically, but I'll go back to this picture. Imagine for a second that this isn't an internal out of bounds, and these bunkers are the only hazard on the hole. They're the only thing that guys have to avoid. And let's say that they're at 300 yards or 295. Then the guys who can just carry this, no question, they have this massive area that they can then hit into. They don't have to worry about that. There is the potential that a lot of these holes, the bunkers will be more in play for the shorter guys than the long guys. And that could be where we do see driving really be a predictor and a driver, pun very much intended, for success here. And so I think if I do skill set stack, it's not just going to be distance. It's going all in on the dual ability to hit it long and straight. Because I think part of that too is who's more likely to take driver on holes and be aggressive. It's the guys who not only have the length to take some of these bunkers or other hazards out of play, it's the guys who also have the confidence that they can hit their line and they can take advantage of that distance and turn some really difficult holes into scoring holes. So if I am going to skill set stack towards the driver, it's going to be for Rory, Cam Young, that prototype of player, the guy who can not just hit it super long, but also has a ton of control over their driver.
For sure. 100% agree. And like I said, it's such a unique week because you're getting such a unique golf course for what we generally see, but in such different conditions than what we're used to seeing it. So, I'm going to miss the days of the huge gorse bushes and, chipping out. And I'm not sure that you're going to get much of that. You're going to get more strategy and, a 4-iron is going to stop in the fairway where they can, it's not going to bound into the bushes and bound into the fescue. And even last week, you saw so many times when people hit it in the high grass and still had a shot. I mean, the shot McIntyre hit on 18 was unbelievable, but how lucky do you have to be to draw a lie that you can hit a fairway wood out of what should be knee-high grass? It's just not the same as what we would generally want to see or do see from those type of golf courses.
Completely agree. And that's not totally dissimilar to the idea that I was just talking about, right? It's that sometimes big misses on these types of golf courses can be better than the small miss. And that just adds this big element of variance that typically doesn't exist off the tee. And the fact that it usually doesn't exist off the tee is why driving is so predictive and so stable, maybe less so this week.
Yeah, I'll be interested. Sometimes when you get a course like this that can be hard, but it's in softer conditions, I almost wonder if it's going to turn into one of those courses that's really easy to make a par, but hard to make a birdie because of the complexes and stuff like that, right? So if the greens being fairly flat, albeit bold shape, they're kind of soft, chipping from around the green, pretty easy to get it up and down as long as you don't hit it in a disaster spot. But maybe they might set it up where the pins, where it kind of becomes really hard to just make a bunch of birdies. So I wouldn't be surprised to see one of those like really, 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 really grouped up fields to where nobody can just go out there and shoot super low numbers. But they have control of that with the pins and the way they set it up.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. I almost think it's going to be about making birdies and avoiding not bogeys, but doubles or worse. I think it might be okay if you make a handful of bogeys as long as you're avoiding the hole where you're pitching out sideways from a bunker and then you pull it into fescue and you flub it and leave it in the fescue grass next to a green and you end up making a triple or something like that. We do tend to see some big numbers, especially when it gets windy in these types of events. So maybe that's going to be a big predictor of success, just avoiding all of that. You can make a few bogeys, especially if you're making some birdies, but avoid the holes that just completely, not just trash around, but also damage you psychologically quite a bit, where it then takes all of the energy you can possibly spend just to get some mojo going again.
Yeah, and obviously, you've seemed to have found where you've landed this week. I think, generally speaking, we have this show. You're kind of still in limbo about where you're gonna, have your outrights. I think I saw today you've already got 4 or 5 of them ready to go.
6 outrights already. Yeah, this is very rare for me, but man, I just found so much value, and I think it's a little bit intuitive, I guess is a good word for it. Like when we have such a unique course fit model that is pointing us in such a, again, unique direction, then yeah, it makes sense that we are going to have some guys projected far better than they would be in any like just neutral event. So from that perspective, it makes sense. But then I also just think that for whatever reason, the books were really soft in like the mid to almost long range, I guess you would say, the odds board. Maybe that's a reaction to Rory kind of joining Scotty and Rahm in this incredible elite tier. For a lot of the season, we've talked about it as more of a 2-headed monster at the top. Now it's pretty clearly a 3-headed monster once again. So maybe it's just a reaction to that. But man, it feels like there are guys in the 60 to 80 range who should be in the 40 to 50 range. There are guys like Keegan, who's 125 to 1, who should be, in my mind, 60 to 70. I can't believe how much value there's been this week. And I'm even more surprised that a lot of it hasn't moved yet. I'm pretty damn sure it'll move before they tee off. But for now, a lot of the numbers that I got on Monday are still available.
Yeah, and most people know this, but everybody needs to know we don't do a lot of pre-show discussion. We're not talking about who we're on or anything or any, we try to make this as fluent as we can, just talking about golf as we go. So I knew he had outrights. I have no idea who one of them is. He has no idea who I'm on in DraftKings. This isn't a pre-made show, right? So I'm going to start. Obviously, Keegan was one of my guesses of where you were going to be, just because I saw where he was and figured it was a little bit high. I'll be interested to see if Tom Kim was one of them, because I think he can compete here on talent. I'm pretty interested because DraftKings this week, as most people know, that's what I spend most of my time on. With such a broad range in pricing, they have some guys that I feel are very, very mispriced. And it's a pretty unique situation to build a stars and scrubs lineup, which I generally try to lean away from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my take on stars and scrubs versus balance lineups has pretty much been the same for a while now, and that is the more difficult you expect the conditions to be, the more balanced you want your lineup. The more difficult, I guess the other way to say it is the more difficult the conditions are, the strongest you want your weak link to be within the lineup. And then when the scoring conditions are easier, that's when the weak links in your lineup have the best chance of really having success, in which case, by all means, go to them so you can fit some studs. So that's kind of my approach. And I don't know exactly how I want to play it this week then, because as we talked about, like we do think that the scores could be pretty easy here, or the scores could be pretty low for the winners, but we also kind of expect there to be some separation where the cut line might be over par, even if the winning score ends up around 20. So it makes that decision of going balanced for stars and scrubs kind of difficult.
Yeah, well, DraftKings to me, I think undervalues European Tour players and live players. I think that's the biggest deal to me. Just in general with their pricing, it seems like that's their weak link here is they undervalue anybody that's full-time live, and they all undervalue anybody that plays on European Tour exclusively. The guys that come over and play some in the US, I think you see they have a better grip on. But start with a guy like Campillo. Like his price is so ridiculous this week for his form and for what he can do. I mean, he's 5,700. It's just it doesn't make much sense. I mean, I understand that he's not in the best form, but 3 weeks back, 3 weeks back, I mean, he top 20 at the BMW, which is a very, very good international golf tournament that gets a lot of good players. It's just such a wide range and such a variety. It just doesn't make much sense to me. There's so many guys in that 57, 58, 59 that are European Tour players. Richie Ramsey's another one Richie Ramsey could make 1 million birdies and could definitely help you win a lot of GPPs this week. So it's a really strange week for me. Just with the pricing and everything. So I think that I'll probably build more stars and scrubs this week than a general normal week.
Campillo had an awesome stretch kind of at the end of February through the beginning of May, by the way. 5 consecutive events where he gained over a true stroke per round. Been a bit sloppier since then. He has gained in 2 of his last 3. It's so interesting that DraftKings has added this little bit of wrinkle into the pricing. I think the guy who stood out to me the most was Taylor Moore at 6,400 if deciding to spend all the way down, because that 6,400 would have been 6,900, 6,800, maybe even 7,000, something like that without this adjusted pricing. So 64 becomes really interesting for somebody that we both seem to really believe in from a talent perspective, a mentality perspective, all of that. Obviously, he's not in the best form, so I don't necessarily know that I'll go there. But I think let's go back a second to your point on the structural mispricing of some of these live guys, because my initial read was that they have adjusted, and that was certainly true at the Masters. It was probably still a little bit true at the US Open. It seems a little bit less true this time around. So, for example, Taylor Gooch, 7,800, Patrick Reed, 7,600. Sandwiched in between those guys, Jason Day, 78, Corey Connors, 77, Keegan Bradley, 76, kind of the stalwarts that we've been going to all season long. It's interesting to me that they're in that range. Russell Henley all the way down at 74. So I was actually thinking they kind of reversed course this time around, and that the live guys at the very least are appropriately priced for the first time in a major.
So, I'm a big talent level guy and win equity guy. Thomas Peters at 7,100 is absolutely laughable. His talent level for being at 7,100 is doesn't make any sense to me. He can be so good. And I think that if he was a PGA Tour player or even still just playing European Tour, he would be in that Keegan Bradley range, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's probably true. I mean, I think if I were to push back on that, I'd say he hasn't gained 2 true strokes per round in an event since the BMW last year in June. But the point is well taken. And going back to the course fit discussion, like he's probably somebody that you really want to target if you are taking that, if you are doing the skill set stack that, hey, what if the longest guys in the field can carry some of these bunkers and just take the trouble out in that way? That's probably where he would pop the most for me.
Yeah, and then the other side of that is like Lingmerth is 6,800 and he's played horrible. Yeah, he played last week, good last week to get in, but like, is he going to be the lowest rostered guy on the whole golf tournament? He's got to be close.
I would think so. Yeah, I mean, there are going to be a lot of guys just well under 1%. I would think he's one of them.
So it's just one of, and the other. I mean, there's definitely, it's hard to know the Brooks Koepkas of the world with Liv of how many guys are like truly getting prepared for just the majors and, kind of just they just go through the motions every other week. It's just a really, really weird pricing at different spots. Do you have any idea why Power WD'd last second?
I don't. And he was somebody who I noticed in Josh Culp's splits tool. All of the he splits last week, Power was popping, and so he was somebody that I was going to play. Now I don't really know what to think. I haven't looked at the splits tool yet this week, so I'm not sure how well he rates in that regard. But he does look like a pretty decent course fit. I'd say around the green, either around the green or putting is certainly his best skill set. Approach play next. And then off the tee, he's just okay. So if we do trust in this event fit model / course fit model, then Power certainly going to rate better than he would in most weeks.
Yeah, and so I was pretty high on him, but not knowing the reason of the WD was kind of odd to me. Because if I build a lineup that is kind of a bomber's paradise, and that same Moronk is in that same area pricing range, right? So there's definitely the ability to build these skill set lineups this week by the way the pricing is too. Yeah. So it's going to be fun, but man, it's the most unknown British Open that I can remember. There's more unknowns this week than, especially for a place where they've actually played the golf tournament before.
Let's stick with this DFS discussion for a little bit. We'll close out the show with the outrights. Which guys are we looking for to make it 3 consecutive Open Championships in a row with an outright winner? Let's go all the way to the top of the board. Scheffler, Rory, Rahm. I guess my first question is, what do you think Rory's win from last week does for him? Does it improve his chances? Does it make it less likely that you're going to go to him? We have this, back-to-back winner discussion quite a bit on the show. What's your thought in these top 3 guys? Finally, some real separation, by the way, in price. Scheffler, $1,300 more expensive than Rahm.
So I'm probably gonna. I think that there's a few people that are immune to the winning back-to-back weeks. I don't think Rory winning changes his life at all. So it's not that big of a deal to me. That being said, his far and away his best club in his bag is his driver. So if we're going to go on this narrative that driving doesn't matter, I'm zero interested. He had some unbelievable iron shots down the stretch, played awesome, congrats. He did everything right down the stretch. That being said, he's probably the one in there that if we're not going to worry about driving accuracy or distance, he'll be my first one out of that group. I honestly think that I'll probably skip Rory and Rahm, and I'll either buy all the way up to Scheffler with a Stars and Scrubs lineup, or I'll go to Cam Smith.
I think for me, it's pretty much going to be all about the ownership. And I have yet to run ownership projections. That will be done tonight for both MME and single entry contests. But I almost want to refrain from taking a stance right now because I don't want to become emotionally tied to anybody. I want to be as flexible as I possibly can once we get those ownership projections, because I think I'm with you in the sense that there's definitely not a ton separating any one guy from the rest here. And so if there is one of these guys, and if I had to guess who it would be right now, I think it would be Rahm that slips through the cracks. I just want to say, screw it. I'm going with that guy. None of these guys should be significantly less owned than the others. So if there is one, he's my guy for the week. So we'll see what ownership says there. but I think this week for me, from a DraftKings perspective, is pretty much defined by the underpriced guys in the $7,000 and $8,000 range. It's what we've said pretty much all year in these elevated events and majors. And I'm going back to pretty much the exact same group. Russell Henley, 74, like I said, Keegan, 76, Connors 2 at 77. But interestingly, if this course fit model is correct, it hurts Connors more than almost anybody else because Connors is so damn good off the tee, particularly with his accuracy. And one of his biggest weaknesses, if not his single biggest weakness, is his short game. So maybe if I'm going hard into this course fit model, I will be fading Connors. But man, Tony Finau, $8,200. Let's talk a little bit about him. Obviously not the best form coming in. What's your read on him? How underpriced is he at 82?
So I'm going to have – it's crazy because this is another discussion we had today. Finau and Tommy Fleetwood are early projections that I saw 18 to 20%, and I have no problem not playing them in a single lineup. Like I probably will have neither one of them in a single lineup. And I can't believe you went through all those low prices without mentioning Siwoo at 7,300, considering – with the approach play and then the around the green stuff and the chipping and like you said, it seems like the same guys they continue to undervalue. And I guess until those guys start to pay off, they're just going to continue to undervalue them. It doesn't make much sense. But yeah, Finau's underpriced, but in my mind, he's only underpriced by $300 or $400. Where I feel like there might be some more leverage other places. I'm not sure that he is going to win on this big of a stage with such a different golf course and playing in the wind. And like I said, I've got no problem. If he's going to be 20%, I have no problem not playing him at all.
Yeah, very curious to see what his ownership is. I think it's worth noting he's been much better of late than his results. He's just had an incredibly difficult time on the greens. What I really like about him this week is I think what most people think about when they think of Finau is how good he is off the tee. And while it's still true that he's very good off the tee, his strengths far and away, approach play and short game. Both of those are significantly better than his performance off the tee. So I think he's a much better fit for this golf course than people realize, and a better fit for just Open championships in general than people realize. So I love the price at 82. I think his form's a bit better than what people realize. And hey, if he really is struggling with the putter and it's something beyond just randomness over the last, let's say 20 rounds or so, then I do like the fact that he's going to be playing on these greens that take a lot of creativity. That's something you've talked about a lot. Like once the imagination comes into play on greens, it can help guys kind of figure it out. And they end up playing much more on intuition and feel than thinking about the mechanics of their struggling putting stroke. So that could help them. And then also just the massive change in pace, right? So in the average week on tour, it's going to have much faster greens than we will see this week. So maybe that could help him turn it around on the greens as well. I'm hoping that he comes in low owned. Obviously, I won't be surprised at $8,200 if he's chalk. If he is low owned, he'll be a core play for me. If he's chalky, then I may end up fading him. We'll have to wait and see.
So I've heard, and I just from a couple of different people, that these greens, albeit bowl-shaped, are going to be slow, and the greens themselves are fairly flat.
Okay.
Not a lot of ridges and tiers and stuff like that.
There are some tier breaks and some like different sections to greens. So I think how much break you have will largely come down to how close are you to the hole. Did you hit it to the right section of the green or not?
So yeah, that kind of goes along with my point here is that if you get it on the right tier, you're going to have what we would call a slow and straight putt, right? And so I'm going to go with the argument here that you have to be a better putter to make a straight in 10-footer on a green that rolls an 8 than a downhill, downgrain 10-footer on a green that rolls a 13. So I'm even going to look more into guys like Cam Smith, like Jordan Spieth, that can hole 10 to 15 footers that are straight and slow over a guy like Finau, who already struggles on really fast greens from 5 feet.
I do think that's true for sure on those very straight putts, but I also think that when you do have break and you have to match line and speed, it can help to get on slower greens where you can take more aggressive lines and try to take a lot of that break out so that you don't have to be so precise on your matching of speed and line.
Yeah, I still think that the slower the greens in general, whether it be flat or breaking, is going to lean to your overall better putters.
Interesting. I would have said the other way. That's interesting.
So I just think that you have one more factor that you have to play into a putt that's it, that you have to get it there. You have to hit it hard enough to get it there. When, these guys on tour, they play 11 to 12 every single week, and generally speed is pretty consistent, so they don't have to worry about that factor. And that everybody talks about them going over to play the Genesis to get ready, the Scottish Open to get ready for the bunkers and the links golf. I think they go over to get ready for the greens. I really believe that they go over there to get used to the greens and the speed of the greens, because it's just different than what we have here. They're not out there rolling them, every morning and every night during regular play all the time. It's just a different factor. So I just think that putting becomes more of a big deal. You have to hit really good putts from 5 feet on slow greens.
Very true. I agree completely with that. Let's go to some other ranges here. Actually, one thing I want to return to for a second. You mentioned like one of the reasons why DraftKings maybe hasn't priced up some of these guys that we've been going to all year is like they're just waiting for these guys to really pop off and do something. Keegan Bradley won the Travelers and is still 76, right? Like Wyndham Clark, yeah, it was a major, but in terms of quality of win, just the quality of field that he got the win, wasn't much better than the Travelers, and he then immediately jumped from that Keegan range to 9,200. He's now 8,700. What is Keegan doing still at 7,600?
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. I hate that it's not the best fit, in my opinion, this week. But that being said, like he's still so far underpriced that it is comical, because he's obviously playing good, and I don't know if it's I don't understand why, or I want lack of respect. I don't really know what to call it. And Keegan Bradley doesn't give a shit what his price is on DraftKings, but in our eyes, it's a lack of a respect deal for the way that he's played, and he's done it a lot. Like I know he won there, but he's played pretty good a lot. So yeah, and I mean, yeah, it's an interesting deal. I hope every single person plays Keegan Bradley and nobody plays Minwoo Lee is what I'm hoping.
Interesting. Maybe I will have to let Keegan know on Twitter that DraftKings is disrespecting him so much to give him a little extra motivation, because I know that I'll be playing him once again. Hey, I know it's early in the week and we don't have ownership projections yet, but do you have any concept of what your core on DraftKings might look like this week?
So I'm going to I'll probably, I know it's dumb, but I end up playing more lineups for majors than I do for other stuff, just because I know I'll be tuned in and watching. Yeah. I'll have a lot of Ryan Fox. I think he's too cheap at 7,400. He's played good in majors. He's just seems to find himself around there. So I'll have, a bunch of him for sure. I'm hoping that Bryson DeChambeau goes really, really low owned so that I can really leverage the field there, because I feel like he is overpriced, which is, one of the guys for Liv that I think that Liv pays a lot to attention to public perception. And I think that his regained form has increased his public perception, and therefore his price goes up. Whereas I think guys that we play against in like the 200 single, maybe like, oh, they overvalued him, and now I can maybe leverage the field there. And And I think I'll have a lot of Cam Smith, and I think that I'll dabble a lot in that lower tier of Campillo, Ramsey. Like, I'm going to have one of those guys in about every lineup, I think, just because it gives you so much leverage everywhere else. And a top 30 out of any of those guys is sufficient at, mid 5,000s.
I like it. I'm pretty sure that my start will be Keegan and Henley. And pretty typical of me to make my core in that range and then surround them with the contrarian upside kind of at the top. With Henley, what I love, number one, is course fit, just continuing to lean into that. Like a lot of the other guys that I've talked about, his two strengths are approach play and around the green play. He's had a really difficult time off the tee this year, a little bit uncharacteristically. Like, he was downright terrible at Muirfield Village off the tee. He would have had a legitimate chance to win that golf tournament if he had just been neutral off the tee. He had two of the worst driving rounds I have ever seen without penalty strokes. So this week, where maybe we have a lot of guys just kind of automatically hitting it to the same spot, will work out really well for him. The other thing that I like about him is how low volatility he is. One of the lowest standard deviations round to round on tour. And that culminates in he is 20th in win odds in our model and 7th in made cut odds. So you get this huge discrepancy. We know that he's extremely likely to make the cut. If I've got contrarian upside elsewhere, I want that quote unquote safety in my lineup. I hate using that word, but it's a high floor that really draws me to Henley. And because of that, I don't really care how I owned he gets. Certainly, I would prefer that he not be 20 to 30%. We'll see what he gets to. But I do really like just the way he sets up. Henley Keegan has worked out quite well so far this year. Hopefully it does so again this week.
Yeah, so an interesting deal that I do sometime. Well, I'll definitely do it this week, right? They have the $250 4 max, which I love because I'll build what I think is my best lineup, right? Who I can get in there. And then I'll take 2 and move them to each of the other 3 lineups and then build 4 others around those 2. So that if my core 6 comes in, I've already got a good build for the other 3 as well. It's just kind of something that I feel like helps. I'll pair 2 together. Like, let's say that I play Cam Smith and Ramsey. So I'll pair them together and play with 4 randoms. And then I'll play Henley and Keegan together and with 4 others that I like. So I try to build around one lineup, and I prefer 3 max, but this week is 4 max. So I'm going to roll with that. I think I'll have a lot. I think I still believe Mcilroy Lee is so talented that he's going to break through at some point. And that's literally just me thinking how talented he is in general.
Yeah, I was even considering just saying, you know what? I know he doesn't project that well in the models. I just don't care. I'm going to follow Justin's lead on just believing in his talents. I almost bet him, still might. And what I think
100 to 1.
Let's see what the best
150
now.
I mean, there's some outrageous numbers.
It's crazy, and so he's down to 80, which is part of the reason I haven't. In fact, now that I just looked this up, I remember I looked this up earlier and thought, you know what? If he was available on Bet Rivers at 80 to 1, where I had the each way on him, I probably would take that. Even at this number, it's the pure outright. I don't think I'm touching it at 80.
Well, that shows you how undervalued DraftKings has him, right? If he's 80 to 1 in the outright and DraftKings has him at 7,700, that just shows you the difference. I'm fairly interested in your outrights this week because I feel like we're different. But before we get there, I have a question on one guy that seems to always show up in a place like this, and that's Patrick Reed. Do you have any thoughts on Patrick Reed here?
Yeah, he's a really good course fit in the sense that obviously driving is his weakness. He's not the best iron player, but certainly has one of the best combinations of short game and putting in the entire world. seems to like the wind as well. So you can take that angle with him. Very, very nearly had an outright on him. Let's go check exactly what his odds are now. I believe he was at 90-1 earlier, and we have him at 1%. So that's 1% versus an implied probability of about 1.1%. Just barely, not enough to get there, but I do really like the play. And hey, he's actually now available at 100-1 over on PointsBet. Second best available is 85-1, all the way down to 66-1. So if you do have access to PointsBet, if you do have access to that 100-1 number, I do think I'd pull the trigger on that one.
Yeah, he's such a unique individual, golf wise and person wise and perspective. I mean, everything about him is so different in the golf world that it's just an easy talking point, right? The same as DeChambeau for me. Like, they're talking points for different reasons, but they're easy to talk about.
I think the best way to play Patrick Reed too, by the way, is a skill set stack just opposite of the kind of going all in on driving type approach. If you're using Cam Smith, you're already hoping that he's separating from the field because of how damn good he is on and around the greens. So you may as well go the same direction. Go to Wyndham Clark. Go to Patrick Reed. Go to Alex Noren or Justin Rose, JM.
I love a Jordan Spieth, Cam Smith, Patrick Reed stack. Just like,
yeah.
I mean, you know, that those three together all showing up at the right time, nobody would be surprised by it. Obviously, you're going to have to dig way down if you got those three in the same lineup. But Patrick Reed at 7,600, he once again, like, I feel like should be about 8,000 to 8,200 at a place like this. And I think if he was playing on the PGA Tour, he would be. Yeah,
throw Seamus Power in there. Throw, I already mentioned Noren. You can throw Brian Harman in that group, Denny McCarthy. Like, there are a lot of ways that you can make that skill set stack pretty damn good. Harris English, another really good option if you're going to go that route. So it kind of gets back to the idea that just building lineups for these types of events is just so damn fun. There's so many ways you can do it, and it's a blast.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, outrights. We've got 6 of them. Let's go in order of the just lowest odds to the highest odds. I'm starting my board with Tony Finau at 60-1. Kind of already talked about him. The biggest question is the putting. And I do think that the most likely outcome is that he does continue to struggle a little bit with the putter. Just think the rest of his game is good enough such that if he just gets back to neutral with the putter, there's a decent chance he's going to be in contention. We have him at 2.2% to win. His implied probability is 1.6%. That's quite a bit of value. So I pulled the trigger there. Next, Justin Thomas. Kind of, you can see a bit of a theme building here. We're kind of going in on the guys who are just way too talented for their current form to continue as is, and just way too talented for the numbers that we're getting. Justin Thomas available at 70-1, and he's actually up to 80-1 now on DraftKings. So a really great number there. The way that I put it in my outright article, I think is the best way to look at it. I view his range of outcomes as almost binary in the sense that he's either going to continue to struggle or he's going to start the week playing really well and just remember, hey, I'm Justin Thomas. I've won 2 majors. I play really well in windy conditions, all this stuff, and just be himself again, in which case this number is crazy, crazy high for him. So third guy, continuing this theme, Hideki Matsuyama, also 80-1. The difference here is I think the narrative that Hideki isn't in the best form is significantly more wrong than it is for Finau and JT. Like, Matsuyama has actually been quite good. And I think the only reason why people have this narrative is that he hasn't really cracked the top 10. But 13th, 16th, 29th, 23rd, 16th, 15th, he's consistently gaining around or above 2 true strokes per round in these events. He's really been in great form, and specifically, he's been awesome with his irons, and he's been awesome around the greens. That's what I'm looking for. So you can kind of group these 3 together as guys I'm buying low on, guys who I just think hey, their numbers have sunk way, way, way too much for how good of players they still will be in the next few years, and even than they still are right now. So what do you think about these first three?
Well, I think the thing that you've done great there with those three is obviously you're gaining maximum odds on people that if their A game shows up, there's not many people that can beat them, even if they have their A game. If Scotty Scheffler has his A minus game and Matsuyama has his A game, Scheffler is not beating him. Yeah. So you have and even to go back to Finau, as that I don't like him that much this week because of the putting issue. If he goes out there and ball strikes it, he can win this golf tournament. And there's no doubt about that. He can go ball strike this golf tournament to death and win. So I have no, like, I love all three of them. I think that the odds you're getting are way too high, and they're for the ability that they have, because all three of them, they may not be on your elite tier, but if they're not on your elite tier, they're the top of the next tier.
Yeah. Yeah. I also like the point you made that you can almost think about it not as like three individual bets, but creating a portfolio here where maybe the likelihood that any one of those three individually actually has their A game is low, but the likelihood that at least one has their A game is pretty high. And so if you have the collection of bets, I think that really works in your favor. That way you don't have to have just the one specific guy go off. It can be any of the three. Those are the three pure outrights I have. And then we get into some each way bets, starting with Taylor Gooch. Also, the best available number for him is 80-1, but it's on Bet Rivers where I have the each way bet. And I will say, I do still like the number for him at 80-1 just for the pure outright, but man, the value just skyrockets when you have the each way available here. For those who are unfamiliar with each way bets, I have detailed this in the outright betting article that was posted earlier today, but a brief refresher. Basically what it means is half of your bet goes to the pure outright. So if I was betting $50 on Gooch for the each way, 25 of those dollars would go to the pure outright at 80-1. And then the other 25 goes to a top 7, because the each way that Bet Rivers offers this week is a 1/5 payout for 7 spots. So you're getting 7 spots for 1/5 of that 80-1 number, which is 16-1. So 16-1 for a top 7. For context, the best available top 5 number for him is 12-1. So you're getting 16-1 instead of 12-1, and you're getting 2 additional spots. That's why I love this bet. We have his top 5 odds estimated at 10.4%, which means his top 7 odds are going to be a little bit higher than that, maybe 12% or so. His implied probability here for the top 7 is just 5.9%. So massive, massive value on this each way bet.
Yeah, no doubt. I tell you all the time, I wish I had access to the each way bets, because I feel like you can leverage everybody. Yeah. You can, it becomes a math problem, right? Of what you're doing. That's all you're doing is studying and creating it. So I'm a big fan.
I love that point, because I think the next one, Russell Henley at 100-1 with the each way on Bet Rivers, makes that point as well as anyone possibly can. He's also available at upwards of 125-1 at PointsBet. But I want the 100-1 because I want these placings. And the reason for that is, as you said, it becomes a math problem. And with Russell Henley, I talked about it earlier, really low volatility player, which means he's got a great floor and not necessarily as great of a ceiling as what you might expect for how well he projects. So, for context, like, his implied win probability at 100-1 is 1%. His implied win probability at 125-1 is 0.8%. Our estimated win probability for him is 1.2%. Is there value there? Yeah, a little bit. But how about the value on this one? His implied top 7 probability, 4.8%. We have his estimated top 5 odds at 11.3%. So we have him more than twice as likely to finish top 5 as his implied probability for a top 7 finish. Just awesome, awesome value. And, we talked earlier, like, I don't usually have 6 outright bets in a week. I didn't do this just because it's the Open and I want more action. I did it because we found just a ton of value this week. So really, really excited for what the week brings us.
Yeah, no doubt. And I'd like for you to look up one of the guys' each way odds that I think that he's shown he could win this year, albeit at a smaller event, and that's Matt Wallace. He's in okay form. I think he finished 40th or so last week. I like the target guys that are undervalued that have also showed they can win, right? So if you've won this year and then you're undervalued, I'm going to lean your way even more. So like I would argue that I would rather play Matt Wallace at 200 to 1 over Finau at, a lot lower odds or just people that have been in contention and not closed. So I know it wasn't against the same field. And I think the other thing about all of your outrights is it's going to matter who's breathing down their neck. They can say it doesn't matter that they're trying to get to a number. But, if you've got Rahm, guys that are just stone cold killers on the golf course, it's going to matter.
All right. I'm trying to find Matt Wallace here in my projections.
Probably can't even find him.
Do you know what his price is off the top of your head?
High 5s or low 6 in DraftKings.
Where the hell is he? Oh, found him. All right. We've got him at 0.3% to win. We've got him at 3.3% for a top 10. Let's see. Where do we have his top 5? So we have his top 5 at 2.4%.
So pretty right on.
Yeah, that's about 4,100. All right. At Bet Rivers, he's 350 to 1. So 350 divided by 5, 70. 70 to 1 for a top 7 for Matt Wallace. What did I just say? 41 to 1 is what we have his estimated odds, what his fair odds should be.
Almost double.
5. So yeah, that's pretty damn good value. I think I will be adding him to the list. Really fun stuff there.
But I love guys that have proven that they can win this year. Like that's a big deal in this game. It's like when you've had the heat on and you can close, and I don't care who it is chasing you. If you can prove it, then it's a value thing in my opinion.
And to hammer home the point about the each ways, by the way, I said we had his win probability at 0.3%. At 350 to 1, his implied probability is 0.28%. So that's identical, right? 0.3, 0.3. So not really value on the outright alone, value for sure on the each way. I will note, however, PointsBet and FanDuel have him available at 500 to 1. That implied probability is 0.2%. So now we're getting somewhere. I still wouldn't call it value, but it's a solid bet. It's don't go spending a ton of money on it. It's
no.
Happen, but yeah, it just from a pure expected value perspective, it is seemingly a positive expected value bet. So I do still like the pure outright at 500. Really like the each way at 350 to 1. Really cool that we could find that. Final outright for me, King and Bradley, 125 to 1. We have his implied probability at 1.8%. This implied probability is 0.8%. Ton of value there, over double the implied probability. The only other guy, I forgot to mention the exact numbers. We have Matsuyama's true win probability or estimated win probability at 2.1%. His implied is 1.2%. So like I said, we're just finding crazy amounts of value in the outright market, particularly in the each way market this week. Really exciting stuff. It makes the week that much more fun to have all these guys, all these bets that we can feel really excited about.
As long as they're in contention on Sunday, that'll make it more fun. But I actually have 2 outrights already. I bet both the Kims, I think 100 and 110, somewhere in there, 90 and 110. I don't remember exactly. But I have Siwoo and Tom Kim. I think if we take away driving distance, then it truly doesn't matter. He's got a lot of fight in him, and I think that it could be a great week for him too. So
he has Siwoo, by the way, has pretty much identical odds to Russell Henley. 125 to 1 is the best number. 100 to 1 is available at Bet Rivers for an each way. If I were going the Siwoo route, I would definitely take that each way. I know that you probably don't have access to that, but Siwoo is like Henley for us in the sense that just rates out much, much better in the top 5, top 10 in the made cut numbers than in the win numbers, which may be, by the way, a little bit unfair to Siwoo. We've seen that he can pop and he can win. And maybe, we're actually in the process of looking at different types of standard deviation for players. So not just looking at the round to round standard deviation, which is what we're currently looking at, but what does he do event to event? And when he starts well, does he continue to play really well? When he starts poorly, does he continue to play really poorly? I think in that regard, Siwoo might show up. So maybe his event to event standard deviation is going to be higher than his round to round standard deviation suggests, which means that we are underestimating his win odds on a weekly basis. Despite that, we've bet him a decent amount this year. We've hit him at the Sony Open in Hawaii. So Siwoo certainly a darling of ours here at FTN. Do you think you'll be playing him on DraftKings?
Definitely. I mean, 7,300. I have to have him in a couple of lineups. No doubt about it. It's just his ceiling is too high at that price, in my opinion. I think Tom Kim I bet at 90 to 1, and I would argue that I would play less Tom Kim at 8,200 or whatever he is than I would Siwoo at 7,300.
Yeah, I love that call. If I start Keegan, Henley, Siwoo, it will be that trio for like the 5th time already this year. So you could almost say at the beginning of the show, you knew we were going to say, hey, play Keegan, play Henley, play Siwoo.
No Adam Scott in there. That's the only one we're missing.
As well. Yeah. Really good stuff. Hey, this has been a really fun show. Hopefully we have a fantastic Open Championship week. Let's have a blast watching it. By the way, I'm in Florida this week, which means I will be playing Prize Picks all week. Over 100 units won so far on Prize Picks this year in PGA, over 200 units in the outright market. So we're chasing 300 there, chasing 200 on Prize Picks. It's going to be a really fun week. Just sweating all of this. Hopefully it's just as fun in the results. Thank you everybody for tuning in. We will catch you next time.